Well, good morning and welcome once again to Elevenses. I'm Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training, and this is my twice weekly webcast. It's Wednesday the 19th of July. This is show number 352. I think it's actually 354, but anyway, whatever. It's Wednesday the 19th. It's a fairly dull and grey morning outside here in London at the moment, not too cool. Not too hot. It looks like it'll brighten up a bit. There is a few spots of rain around down here in the southeast, but nothing serious. Kevin's looked in. Good to see you, Kevin. Thank you. Nice to see you. We've got a fairly packed show once again today. The opening story is that a consortium of motorcycle interest groups here in the UK have called for changes to CBT. Where have we heard that before? The bypass around Stonehenge has got the official government go-ahead, and I can also ask, where have we heard that one before? And tough rules on e-bikes are prompting Chinese youngsters in one city to drive wheelchairs to get to work. Meanwhile, in California, a bill would give Sikh riders exemption from helmet laws in the state. And BMW have launched a new rental portal for their motorcycles. We'll have a quick look at that too. We'll also ask if there is a market for a British-made 500cc single while we take a look at Herald's new Brute. And finally, we'll go back to the calls to shake up CBT, and I'll ask whether or not it would actually result in CBT, compulsory basic training, being improved for motorcyclists. So grab yourselves a brew, settle down for the next 30 minutes or so as I take you through those news stories. Don't forget, if you've got a question, anything you want to ask, do drop me a line. I'll try and answer online if I possibly can. If I can't do it online, I will get back to you after the show, but I do try to respond live if I possibly can. Right, so okay, so let's start with the news items that I've just been talking about. Back in 2017, there was a consultation process had come to a conclusion, and the result was a number of changes were put in place into CBT by the Department for Transport and the Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency, DFT, DVSA. But the fact was, when I went and looked, I looked to see what had changed. I couldn't really see very much change in the content. The biggest change that I actually saw was a requirement for the course to be delivered in a way that was client-centered. I always saw that at totally at odds with the very prescriptive course, which needs everything delivered in a set order, of course. But frankly, that's what the instructors always try to do anyway. If you've got a very experienced rider coming back to do their umpteenth repeat CBT, you didn't treat them in exactly the same way as a 16-year-old who'd never even ridden a bicycle before. Anyway, the National Motorcyclist Council, the Motorcycle Industry Association here in the UK, a number of road safety charities, including the IAM, and other transport authorities, such as the Transport for London, have all signed a joint letter to the Secretary of State for Transport, Mark Harper, calling on the government to make positive changes to improve CBT for motorcyclists and to change the way riders on CBTs are dealt with. The National Motorcycle Council's Executive Director, who is Craig Kerry-Clinch, he said, "The changes we call for in our joint letter today were agreed by government several years ago and their introduction is long overdue. We urge the Secretary of State and Department for Transport to commence work to implement this positive and potentially life-saving legislation." So here's what the document asks for. Now, the first point is the introduction of a training course to upgrade motorcycle licence entitlements, and I'll come back to this next week. Secondly, the creation of powers to revoke CBT certificates or take other measures for learner drivers who have accrued 6 penalty points. the restriction of learners who complete CBT on an automatic transmission to machine to riding only automatic machines, the provision for upgrading entitlement to manual machines for riders with such a restriction, the establishment of a combined CBT and DAS instructor qualification assessment, limiting the time that down-trained instructors can give instruction, requiring instructors to ensure trainees are appropriately entitled for riding, strengthening the quality assurance scheme for motorcycle instructors, introduction of the theory test as part of or prior to CBT, digitising the CBT admin process, implementing an earned recognition, whatever that might be. The letter calls on the government to, quote, take note and act in partnership with all the parties to make these changes to CBT and also to other areas of motorcycle safety so a more sustainable and proactive approach can be taken to ensure casualty reduction for this important mode of mobility, transport and leisure. So there you have what the consortium of motorcycle groups have to say, and I've got things to say, and I'll come back to this at the end of today's show. So, moving on from there, another long-running saga is the A303. Now, if you've ever been tempted to get to the southwest of England from the sort of London Midlands area, you'll know that a popular route has long been along the A303. Now, much, but not all of that road was actually dualled, excuse me, long ago. The trouble is, so many people use the road, the A303 becomes a congestion hotspot. And it's not just at weekends or during peak hours either. It carries so much traffic that the queues form, often leading onto the stretches that are just single carriageway. So let's have a quick look at the Stonehenge area, and you can see the A303 running slap bang through the middle of the map there. And there is Stonehenge itself. Now the section of the single carriageway runs across there. Now that is one of the most notorious bottlenecks on the entire road, and of course it runs right next to one of Britain's most precious heritage sites. The Standing Stones here in Wiltshire are actually a UNESCO World Heritage Site, so they have lots of protections. Now, for decades, plans have been put forward to upgrade the road along this 2-mile stretch, but variation after variation have come a cropper on the environmental impact on the monument site itself. And the problem for developers is that the Stonehenge complex doesn't just encompass the iconic standing stones themselves. There's a rather lovely photo of them. Although we often think just of the stones because those are the things that we most obviously see, there are a remarkable number of archaeological features and structures that all provide valuable insights into the Neolithic and Bronze Age periods of Britain's history. You can tell that I am something of an archaeology buff. So nearby there are well-known features such as Durrington Walls and Woodhenge, but there are something in excess of 315 known burial mounds in the vicinity of Stonehenge and its surroundings. Now these barrows vary in size, shape, construction, and they reflect different burial customs and cultural practices over the centuries which the site was active on. So what's the problem? Well, this is where, oops, that's not the map, the picture I wanted. Where's my map gone? This is where the problem arises with the map. I've lost the map with the road. Now it's difficult to go back. I'll go back one. That's the easiest thing to do. I'm not sure why the map hasn't appeared, but basically the new road just runs along here. So it is just south of the existing road. Now, the latest attempt to develop this, the consent order that was granted by the government, it was by Grant Shapps, it was quashed in the High Court in July 2021, and again it was about concerns about the impact on the monument area, and it followed a year of campaigning by a group called Save Stonehenge World Heritage Site. Now, the latest upshot of this is that Mark Harper, the Transport Secretary, has granted a fresh development consent order to overhaul this 8 miles of road and to construct a 2-mile tunnel alongside the existing road. Now, it's not clear how this plan to construct the tunnel, it cost 1.7 billion, differs from the previous one. And it was known with the previous scheme that the tunnel construction would have obviously involved extensive excavation and ground disturbance in that area, which is known to contain unexplored archaeological remains. And it was also seriously believed that the construction process would likely damage or destroy those features. Now, the tunnel would ultimately hide the road, of course, completely, but the construction itself would take several years. And while that was happening, it would significantly alter the visual experience of the Stonehenge landscape. All concerns, of course, to the people who want to protect Stonehenge. But beyond that, there are issues such as the hydrological impact, because the watercourses that run through the rocks, which the tunnel would be dug through, would be altered. That could disrupt water flows. And the machinery itself would create noise, but potentially more importantly, a lot of vibration too, which is likely to destroy unfound features. So back in 2020, November, that was, Grant Shapps, the then Transport Secretary, he gave the go-ahead despite advice from the planning inspectorate officials that it would cause permanent irreversible harm to the area. That's why the plans were blocked. So now, in a 4-page letter granting fresh approval, Mark Harper says he's satisfied that the project is the harm on spatial visualizations and settings is less than substantial and should be weighed against public benefits. There are immediately contrary opinions coming out. The University of Buckingham archaeologist Professor David Jacks, who's led digs in the area for a decade, said that the tunnel would clearly compromise the historic value of the site. And the point he makes is the Stonehenge World Heritage Site landscape is utterly precious, and you tamper with it at your peril. You cannot make it come back. So more appeals are guaranteed. Chances of the road being built anytime soon are close to zero, in my estimation, and maybe the time has come to think about a completely different alternative route. I don't know the answer to that. If you have any opinions, if you use that road regularly, if you are a fan of archaeology and Stonehenge, I'd be happy to hear all aspects of the arguments about whether the road should go ahead. Right, okay, so don't forget, set a reminder for the show. It goes out, ELEVENSES is on Wednesdays and Sundays at 11 o'clock. Generally speaking, it is live. Very rarely there is a recorded show, and even more rarely I miss one altogether. If you have missed a show, they are all sitting in their own channel over on YouTube. On my channel, Survival Skills UK, do go over there, do go and support me, do become a subscriber, and you'll get links, of course, to all the other videos that I produce on various aspects of better biking. So, all right, now on with the next report. Well, this is an interesting one because according to local reports from the southern Chinese city of Guangzhou, recent e-bike regulations have restricted the operating speeds, and they restrict the usage of these electric bicycles rather. One thing riders will have to do under the new regs is apparently dismount to push their bike across striped road crossings, which sounds like a rather odd thing to do, but hey ho. But it's led to a rather unexpected change in vehicle usage. So get your heads around this one, if you will. A loophole in the law allows for people to drive wheelchairs to get to work. So these electric wheelchairs are not subject to the e-bike regulations, and they're not governed in any way by conventional vehicle or traffic laws. So not only do you not get stuck in the traffic on a wheelchair, you don't have to pay for vehicle registration, and you can use pedestrianised areas. So okay, the e-bikes go faster than the wheelchairs, but that ability to move through restricted areas is said to level the playing field. So predictably, users have also reported the wheelchairs being more comfortable too. One wheelchair driver said, "I don't have to worry about driving and finding a parking space at my destination, and I can ride my wheelchair right up to my desk." So there we go. There are innovative solutions to every problem. Local paper has reported a 60% increase in the sale of electric wheelchairs in the region in the first half of 2023. The most popular models cost around $420, so not a huge investment if you want to get to work in your electric wheelchair. Remarkable story, that one. Here's another one that is interesting on a sort of a cultural level. In the UK, we're used to the legislation which exempts those who wear a turban or a patka for religious or cultural reasons from wearing a motorcycle helmet whilst riding. Now, a similar bill has just cleared the California State Senate. Senator Brian Darla, who introduced the bill, he said he was approached by bikers from the Sikh community who said they wanted the ability to practice their religious beliefs whilst riding motorcycles. Now, the Sikh community in California is actually huge. There are over 200,000 Sikhs living in the state, and it means it's actually over half or around half of all the Sikhs living in the USA, according to the recent census data. And the bill cleared the Senate on Wednesday, and it now heads to the Assembly to see if it will be ratified. Now, 18 states, including California, have got universal helmet laws, and currently violations are subject to a fine of up to $250 or possibly or a year on probation, which is a fairly stringent or swinging, I think is the correct word, punishment. Darla said the rule doesn't intentionally discriminate against religions, but it does limit how certain communities can engage in their customs. Now, of course, this is not going down without a fight. The Automobile Club of Southern California opposes the legislation on the grounds that it could weaken the universal motorcycle helmet law that currently operates in the state, whilst the County Health Executives Association goes as far as to call for a change in the way helmets are designed rather than allowing Sikhs to ride without wearing one. They want innovation in the design of helmets to accommodate head coverings instead of weakening existing helmet laws and risking the safety of those riders. Frankly, with the average turban being, I think it's sort of 6 or 7 meters of cloth, we're trying to get that wound into a helmet, get the helmet stable on your head, and still offer protection seems like a tough ask to me. Anyway, as well as the UK, several provinces in Canada, including Alberta, British Columbia, Manitoba and Ontario, they all exempt Sikhs from helmet laws. And not surprisingly, of course, exemptions have also been granted in India. Now, next on the list of stories, BMW have opened a new Rent-A-Ride online portal for motorcycle rentals, and it's now integrated into its Fuel for Life website. It offers, they say, nearly 2,000 BMW rental motorbikes, which they say are for hire in pristine condition across no less than 315 BMW Motorrad partners in 26 countries. Here's the link to the website if you want to go and have a look at it. Not the USA though, that has its own Rent-A-Ride portal. Now, motorcycles can be rented, it says, for a period of between 1 day and a maximum of 28 days. Certificated BMW Motorrad rental partners, they have trained dealership personnel. They ensure a professional handover of the motorcycle directly at the booking location, and naturally you can hire appropriate rider equipment and practical accessories such as panniers or navigation devices. You can book those at the same time as you require. Now, oddly enough, having had a look at the site this morning, looked at the map, there are no dealers listed in the UK. So I scrolled sideways and went off to Europe, but the closest dealer I could find to the UK was actually in Bruges, and they didn't appear to have any bikes at all on any of the days where I looked. Now, I did find one in Corsica that did have a bike. It was a BMW F90, F900, but I discovered the fee for that was €280 per day. Well, that's around £250 to rent a bike for a day, so I might not be beating my path to their door anytime soon. I did notice that the BMW press release says the scheme also offers prospective purchasers the opportunity to test ride motorbikes extensively for a longer period of time before making a purchase decision. So it did cross my mind that just possibly this might mean the end of dealers holding a range of test bikes to be loaned out for free, or it could operate side by side with the existing test bikes. I don't know the answer to that one. I think did I say good morning to Kevin? I can't remember, but Terry's also looked in. Good morning to both of you. Right, so on to the next session of the show, which is all about motorbikes, and designed, engineered and built in Britain. That is the proud claim that Herald make for their 500cc brute motorcycle single. Now let's have a look at it. Here it is. There we go. The company Herald, they started by building a range of Learner Legal 125s. These were retro styled machines. They're actually built in China, of course, but they were tweaked and improved at Herald's Cambridge works. Now, they followed a 250 single. That's also appeared in a couple of different guises using the same sort of route of a Chinese built bike, which has been tweaked here in the UK. But the Brute, which frankly I think is a truly dreadful name, moves more of the production to the UK. And Herald say, quote, "We have manufactured a wealth of components internally, including yokes, wiring loom, swing arm, outriggers," not quite sure what an outrigger on a motorcycle is, "levers and so much more. When necessary, we worked with premium British suppliers such as HEL Performance for our front brake system. So when we say built in Britain, we mean it." Well, what else do you get that's British? We do get Avon Road Rider Mark II tyres, although of course the Avon factory has now shut down and isn't producing tyres anymore, so they're technically imported. You also get the frame castings, the aluminium swing arm, the spindles are all machined in-house. The 17-inch wheels and the adjustable front and rear suspension come from Herald's sister company, which is Racetech, and the rear shock works with Herald's own unique floating shock linkage system. The full LCD instrument cluster, that's sourced from Acewell, and the seat and the plastic mouldings are also made in Britain. The tank is from Italy, the rear brake is from Spain's J. Juan. And lighting is LED. But the heart of the bike, of course, is that 450cc engine, and that is Chinese. It's a 4-valve single overhead cam water-cooled motor. It's the same NC450 found in Fantic's Caballero range, incidentally, and it is sourced from Zhongshan. Now, all the evidence is pointing to the newer Chinese motors really becoming something of a match for the Chinese and European manufacturers, and of course some of the bikes do use Chinese components or even bigger chunks than we possibly realise. And on paper, a 43 horsepower single should propel the machine pretty effectively over most types of terrain, though whether it really needs a 6-speed gearbox I doubt. Maximum torque is likely to be around 43 newton meters, which should come in at around 6,000 RPM. The weight is given at just over 145 kilograms, though I rather suspect that's a dry weight and doesn't include the 13.5 litres of fuel. So add 15 kilograms to be on the safe side, you get to 160 kilograms, which is, he says, doing the maths on his head, about 350 pounds, and that takes it to roughly the same weight as the Caballero, which makes sense. Now, Herald say they have sorted the tuning in-house using their own dyno, something also Fantic claimed to have done, but reviews talk of plenty of vibration, pops and bangs on the overrun, and not surprisingly perhaps tests of the Fantic say exactly the same. The service intervals are the same as the Fantics and disappointingly short too, at just 3,000 miles. The bike should be sort of lithe enough to deal with the city though, and rapid and nimble enough for the twisties too. Now, I used to run an old XBR 500, Loved that bike to bits, and it probably would have had very similar performance figures, but I have to say with the balancer shafts that Honda fitted, the engine was smooth. I can't say the styling actually does it for me. It's designed as classic, but it looks too much like the current fad for cut down customs and sawn off rear ends for me. There's actually no provision for a passenger, even though there does appear to be a little sort of pad where a passenger would sit. I can't see any pillion foot rests there, so there's certainly no grab rail, is there? The seat height is also pretty astronomical. It's 835 millimeters, which is almost 33 inches off the ground. That's going to put the bike out of reach of a lot of shorter riders, unfortunately. And I can't say I'm enthused by the sort of upright handlebars, the cut down front mudguard, the complete lack of anything covering the rear wheel, for example. At least it doesn't have tiny mirrors hung under the bars, as so many customs do, right where they'll dent the tank in a spill. Now, rather surprisingly, reviews say there's no ABS or traction control. I frankly live without the latter, but I'm under the impression that ABS was a requirement for all modern motorcycles sold in the UK and the EU. So I'm guessing that this is built as a build-to-order special, which avoids the need to fit the machine with ABS, and frankly that is a bit of a letdown. Now, one of the photos I found didn't actually show the machine's finish in the best light, so here's a as new photo of the instruments and bars, and here is a photo of the same area taken on the test machine. And I kind of you expect a bit of wear and tear, but there's flaking paint on one side of the handlebar and what looks like scratches all round the instruments, possibly due to the need to sort of reach over and down to the ignition barrel, which is badly positioned right behind that tiny instrument panel. My 40-year-old 250 Honda's bars are actually in much the same condition, so a bit disappointing for a nearly new bike. But if there's a shocker, really, it's the price. The machine is going for an asking price of no less than £6,950 plus on the road charges. So Herald do say it's down to the person who actually sells it to you to calculate the final cost. Now, as Terry pointed out after I scheduled the show this morning, there are the new pair of Triumph 400s to consider. Now, we don't know the pricing of those machines, but Terry tells me that the Bajaj bikes, which have already gone on sale in India, are priced out there at the princely equivalent of £2,175. Now, clearly we're not going to get the bikes at that price, but as Terry says, it's going to be interesting to see what Triumph think is the right cost for Western markets. My guess is probably something in the £5,000 to £5,500 range, because that would undercut the new BSA Gold Star and the Brute, by the way, quite handily. It sits temptingly just a little bit more expensive than the premium Japanese 300s, 400s. And it also slips under Honda's pricing for their basic CB500 Twin, which is currently available for £6,099, which includes the on-the-road fees. So, frankly, summing up, even if the Brute is a built-to-order bike with some premium running gear above and beyond the quality that you're going to get on any of the others, that £7,000 plus price tag looks to me to be at least £1,000 too much. Right, okay, don't forget, if you can possibly support the show, I'm always really grateful for your donations. You know, you drop me a cup of coffee and it helps me come back and keep running these shows for you, trawling through all the news stories and finding things that you probably won't find in the mainstream press. That's what I always try to do. And of course, the moment you sign up on my coffee page, you open up access to thousands of better biking articles. Well, 1,000 better biking articles that are over there about now. So do go over there. It's www.compulsorybiking.com. coffee.com with a hyphen in the middle of coffee and /survival skills. Go and have a look. There's plenty of free stuff to read. Have a trawl around the index, see what interests you, and if you like what you see, buy me a cuppa and you keep supporting me, for which I am always very grateful. Right, so let's round off with today's in-depth item. Now, this is coming back to the announcement that the National Motorcyclists Council and partner groups want to improve CBT. That's the Compulsory Basic Training course, which validates a new provisional motorcycle license to allow novice riders to actually ride on the road. Well, the first thing I'd say is that, having read through the statement, the statement says that the improvements could play a critical role in enhancing road safety, but there's little in the proposals that would actually seem to improve the content of the course or the structure of the course itself. And surely it's the practical competence of the riders who complete the course that we teach new riders that matters more than anything else. It's all very well, sort of policing them after they've gone through CBT. The elements about giving riders with 6 points, presumably taking their CBT away from them, like happens with a driving license. And the sort of monitoring the use of training schools who use automatics, and then riders who go out and ride manual bikes. Yeah, that's all important stuff, but it's not actually upgrading the course. It's tweaking at the edges of how the course is used. So one line that attracted my attention asked for changes to the CBT syllabus, including requiring riders to ensure trainees are appropriately attired for riding. Well, in my experience, that's exactly what training schools do as a matter of course. We've had trainees in the past when I was working for CBT schools. We've had trainees turn up in totally inappropriate kit. At one school, we had riding gear for hire. Well, not for free, basically. We kitted them out. Everything but boots we had for them. So all they needed to do actually was turn up in a stout pair of boots, and we would kit them out. Another school, we didn't have that facility, but we made sure that they knew what they were supposed to turn up in. And if they didn't, we just sent them home. So I think that's pretty much a given for most training schools. Now, the statement also talks about condensing the 5 elements of CBT to 4, but what it doesn't say is what should be left out, what should be added. My guess is that they're simply talking about a reshuffle of the existing content, because I've always felt that some of the content which we talk about in element D should be in element A. I'll come on to that in a moment. The others, the sort of things like the creation of powers to revoke CBT certificates or take other measures focusing on learner riders. Frankly, that's a legislation issue and isn't really anything to do with CBT itself. It may be, CBT may be the piece of paper that gets riders on the road, but how it's policed afterwards is not really anything to do with training schools. So others of the proposals, I think, are fiddling at the edges of the management of the course, such as limiting the time that down-trained instructors can give instruction. Is there any evidence that this is actually a problem? I worked with a couple of down-trained instructors at one well-regarded training school who had absolutely no interest in becoming full-time instructors. They were quite happy to help out a few times a month, and they've been doing that for years, and they were actually very competent instructors. But would they have gone to Cardington to do their assessment? No, they wouldn't have done. They would have just said, nope, this is a part-time job for me, something I enjoy doing on a Sunday, and I will not bother in future. So the danger is that you will lose some of those instructors. Other elements are related to the administration process, which is how the school operates. And it's arguable that digitizing the CBT process is a good thing, because it would mean that police are able to check CBT status without actually having to stop a rider and demand to see the piece of paper. But I can't see it affecting road safety generally. This is about policing after the event. So there are a couple of sensible provisions, and these are both ones that the training schools themselves have been calling on the government to implement for a long time. And the first one is the restriction of a CBT taken on an automatic, which would allow riders only to ride automatics. Now, this has been chewed over, spat out, regurgitated, talked about again, and it's been put off and off and off for years. And it's high time, frankly, that it was enacted. There's a box on the CBT certificate that was there, Gordon Bennett, 20 years ago. So the linked proposal is for a new course which would upgrade a rider's CB entitlement. Once they've taken their CBT on automatic, if they then chose to ride a manual machine, they could take an extra course, an add-on, that would upgrade their CBT to work for a manual machine. So it sounds like what is being proposed is a short training session rather than reworking the full CBT. That doesn't sound like a bad idea to me. But you would at least have to run through, I would have thought, all the off-road manoeuvres and then repeat the full road ride. So it's not going to be a 10-minute round the cone job, or it shouldn't be. Now, the second of the proposed changes is for the theory test, which is the thing that you do multiple guess and then the hazard perception videos game, for that to be completed and passed before you turn up to do a CBT. I'm eminently sensible, because far too many riders turn up without ever having bothered to read the highway code, even though every training school will ask that the CBT trainee, the candidate, is aware of the provisions of the highway code. But it seems to me the proposal to actually make it part of CBT is completely unworkable. Think about how CBT works. Think about it's often outdoor. It's often with minimal sort of covered facilities. What you are unlikely to have at many schools is a classroom with a terminal which can run a CBT theory test, which is linked to the DVSA, where it can be marked and a certificate, pass certificate, spat out. I don't think that's going to happen. It's a non-starter. But having read all of that, what do I think? Well, there's nothing there that says CBT needs a top-to-bottom rethink, and that's what I believe it needs. What do I think needs to be added? Well, one of the most vital elements of motorcycle control was actually deliberately excluded from CBT when the course was put together, and that is how to steer a motorcycle. We teach you to go, we teach you to stop, but what happens in between isn't in the syllabus. And there's nothing in the statement that suggests the content would be overhauled to include counter-steering, which seems to me to be a crucial omission. Other elements need some real-life context to be more useful. Now, the technique that allows riders to make tight turns in confined spaces is vital. We may have to get around a hairpin bend at some point on the mountainside. But how do we approach teaching riders to do it? We'll do it via a figure of eight. Now, no one ever rides a figure of eight on the road. So the problem here is that there is a disconnect between the skills taught and what the skills are actually used for, like turning right at a mini roundabout. Now, surely some creative thinking here could be used to create some of the on-road hazards we encounter in the off-road area. If you have space to lay out cones for a figure of eight, you have space to lay out cones for a mini roundabout. And then you can introduce all the other things that are necessary for turning right on a mini roundabout, such as signals and observations. It just needs some creative thinking. And the same applies to element D. Now, this is the one where the trainees are sat down and they're given a stiff talking to about things like the legal requirements for riding on the road, their personal responsibility not to be under the influence of drink, drugs, medicines, and their attitude to riding immediately before they go out on the road. And then there are a whole list of things that they should be aware of that they might encounter. Now, I've always thought that the content in this element D, was just a stream of consciousness. It was a word salad, basically. My guess is that it was someone was tasked back before CBT was finalised. So they were tasked with coming up with a list of things that they thought should be covered prior to going out on the road ride. And as something came to mind, they just jotted it down on a piece of paper, and then they handed that piece of paper in. And somehow, as CB took shape back before it was introduced in 1990, nobody ever took the time to read that list, think about the logical order in which the topics need to be introduced to make sense, or reorder it in any kind of way. So it was just passed on to instructors as it was, and too many trainers, in my experience, just followed the order on the sheet. But the DSA, as they were, really didn't reward changing things around. Now I took that list, looked at it and thought, no, this needs some rethinking. So I got all the legal stuff out of the way at the beginning, and then I went through the rest of the on-road stuff, getting into the more complex stuff as I went. What happened? Well, I got criticised by one examiner doing a check test on me for daring to change the set order of the element, even though the guidance to instructors said things can be moved around. You just have to make sure the elements are in the order that they're put in. Right now it's a mess, that particular section. Even after the 2017 updates, it's still largely, I think, back to front. The legal requirements, the drink and drug stuff, that belongs right up the beginning when the licenses are checked, not just before going out on the road when riders are worried about how they're going to deal with traffic. I think, again, this is often delivered as a tick list assessment. So you tell the trainee what they need to know, and then you say got it, and they nod and say yes, and that's it. It's done. As far as the DVSA are concerned, you could use a much more interactive approach to this. I used to use an early learning centre play roadway with bikes, little cars and road signs, and it got the trainees' attention. They joined in, they made suggestions, they were actually interacting with me, something that you can't do when you're sitting in front of a class of 4 people and just asking them simple questions. It doesn't really work the same way, so that really should be changed in the way it's delivered. It wouldn't be difficult to do either. But there's nothing here to say any of this has been considered, so my conclusion is that this is just fiddling around at the edges of CBT. And I'll say it again, I've said it regularly for the last 20 plus years, if the motorcycle industry really wanted to improve rider safety, they would look to end the dispensation that allows essentially untrained motorcyclists to go out on the road on an L plate. No other class of road user gets the freedom to be out and about unaccompanied without having passed their test of competence first. So why do motorcyclists still get this dispensation? Well, it's historic. Obviously, it's been in the statute books for a very long time that motorcyclists can ride on L plates, but most importantly, of course, the industry wants it because it makes it easy to get on a motorcycle, and if it's easy to get on a motorcycle, it's easy to sell motorcycles to learner riders, and of course those are the very ones who are most at risk. I'm out of time for today, but next week I'll look at 2 of the other proposals which to my mind are kind of sneaked in almost into this review of CBT, and are actually a lot more important than they appear. So make sure you look back in next Wednesday, July the 26th, to find out what they were. That run out of time for today. That's something to look forward to next week. I'm always interested in your comments. If you've got anything to say about the way you feel CBT went for you, if you are an experienced rider and you're looking back on your own experiences as a learner rider, perhaps pre-CBT even, let me know what you think, whether CBT is a good idea, bad idea, middling idea, what you would change. Always happy to hear comments from everybody. Right, okay, so that is it for today. I think I've done all the banners, haven't I, today, so it's just a case of rounding off the show. If you are out there, of course, today and riding your bike, do make sure you stay shiny side up. Thanks once again for looking in. I've been Kevin Williams, and this has been Elevenses.